All right, well, welcome to session 6 of It's All About Me. And tonight we're going to be looking at the 5 love languages from Gary Chapman's book that he wrote a number of years ago. So a lot of you probably heard of the book. You might even have it. I have an older version of the book, but it's the same material, just a different cover. It's a great book to read. Easy read. It's very applicable to each of you personally, and obviously as a couple. But just to recap again, obviously we start off with the foundation, session 1. What's your marriage built on? What's your life built on? Is it God? Is it other things? Hopefully the foundation of the marriage is starting with God Himself. Once we understand that, then we looked at, let's just look at our marriage, our relationship right now. What season is my marriage in? And we kind of looked at the different seasons. We talked about the seasons of marriage, the cycles of marriage, how you can go in and out of certain seasons. Session 3, help me out a little bit. What was session 3 on? Understanding ourselves. And God, how God's designed us, how God's designed my spouse. We have to understand each other. We have to understand how God's made me. When I can understand those things a little better, then I get a clearer picture of what my spouse deals with, and then what I'm dealing with my spouse. We want to understand those things. And then our apology language in session 4 was learning how to speak the right apology language to each other. So when we've had those times where we've offended or we just need to say I'm sorry, how best to do that, because we each have an apology language. And then last week we said the title was Now We Can Talk. Now we're starting to work on our communication. So we did some exercises, the active and assertive listening, and we kind of spoke back to not just repeating the words verbatim, but put back in our own words, this is what my spouse is saying. It's like, yeah, that's pretty good. And did some ratings and sharings as far as, here's an event that's going on this weekend, or do you feel like going out to dinner tonight? And how do you rate that? Is that an absolute 10 or are you like at a 2? So you just kind of rate the feelings of how you feel about it, whether you want to do this or you don't. And then also just sharing just some daily events throughout the week that happens, but just to give some lines of communication open that you can just be sharing with each other. And so one of the first things I wanted to do in your booklets, if you have those, turn to page 14 and 15, because I didn't get a chance to go through the 8 communication skills to increase intimacy. 8 communication skills to increase intimacy. And this really will help, and it's not just talking about like a physical intimacy, this is just talking about being intimate, just being able to be open and sharing so you can have better lines of communication. Some people, when I notice them talk, I'm always reading and I'm observing couples when I meet with them, when I sit with them, whether I just see them sitting and talking with each other, whatever, and I always notice a lot of these things. It's kind of like, man, that person is a great listener. Or that person, man, they're just, their wife or their husband saying this and they're just totally, it's right past their head, they're not getting it. They're just totally missing it. But here's some different skills to increase those things. First one is this. We'll just go through them and then we'll get into the 5 love languages. Give full attention to your partner when talking. We might have hinted on this before. It's just turn off the phone, shut off the TV. The important thing is make eye contact. Make eye contact. That's very important. So whenever you're talking with someone, if you're looking right at their eyes, you know that my focus is at least on you. I might be thinking of something else, but at least I'm not just like on my phone, or I'm watching TV or at the computer, or I'm doing something else. But when I give you my full attention, that's when that's very important of a way to increase intimacy. Number 2 is focus on the good qualities in each other and often praise each other. That's just being praiseworthy. Compliment with words. Promote each other, build each other up instead of tearing each other down. Because we can obviously be very quick to tear each other down and make fun of, pull out the negative, bring out some jabs, just say, yeah, I know this will push their button if I just say this, remind them about this, that, or the other. We don't want to do those things. We want to do the things that build each other up and by praising each other. So focus on those good things to say. The other one was be assertive, and we talked about this last week with assertiveness, being able to share your thoughts, feelings, and needs. A good way to be assertive without being critical, remember, is to use what? The I statements. Remember, you start with owning that statement that you're saying versus starting it off with a you. You never, you always. Why do you? And if you're putting the finger and saying you, that's you're attacking me. You're coming at me with some words that they're probably going to respond back with, well, with you, and you, how come you this? It's just going to be a back and forth versus starting off with I. And here's an example of I worry when you don't let me know you'll be late, rather than you're always late. You see, it's saying the same thing, but it's 2 different ways. The 4th one is avoid criticism. Avoid criticism. Put downs and different things like that probably aren't going to get you very far being intimate. That's pretty much just going to putting another brick on that wall. Of just like, well, I've heard it again and I'm hearing it now one more time. We need to avoid those things. If you must criticize, balance it with at least one positive comment. So sometimes we do want to offer some constructive criticism. You've probably heard it put that way. I can handle constructive criticism. And when we do that with our spouse, we want to also make sure that we're giving them positive comments as well, so to balance it out. Here's an example. Say, I appreciate how you take the trash out each week. But in the future, can you remember to also wheel the trash can back from the end of the driveway? I appreciate that you're doing those things, but could you just do this also? So you're giving kind of like a compliment and what you appreciate about them, but here's the critique now. Here's a little bit of the criticism. Could you just bring the can back? That would just help me out a bit so I don't run into it when I'm backing out of the driveway or something. Number 6 is listen to understand, not to judge. Remember before, as you're listening to your spouse, are you just thinking of what you're going to say or looking for that opportunity like, well, now it's my turn? Or you listen to try to understand? Remember when we're talking about the ways to communicate, when you're listening to them, you should be then ready to ask a question, just to clarify or just to say, so what you're saying is, and you kind of restate back to them, and then you're asking another question. So what you're saying then, dear, is you finish the sentence. And they're like, yes, this is what I'm saying. Like, see, they haven't just heard you, they've listened, because now they understand, because now I got it. I've asked some questions, I understand exactly how you're at on that issue, or whatever happened at work today. I get it now. But you have to ask maybe a couple questions. So listen to understand, and that's how you do that, not to just judge and say, well, that's just how it is, and you're just always that way anyway. You just take things the wrong way. It's just like, well, that didn't help. You didn't listen to me. You just basically ran me down. Number 7, use active listening skills. We did that last time. Summarize your partner's comments before sharing your own reactions or feelings. Remember, putting that into your own words and then saying it back to them and like, yes, thank you. You're exactly on the same page with me. That's exactly what I'm talking about. So be able to use that active listening skills. And 8th, finally, it says avoid blaming each other and work together for a solution. Put here, like, ask them, do you feel that I have heard you? Have you been heard? And just, if you ask them that question, hopefully they'll be able to say, yes, I feel that you're understanding what I'm trying to say to you. So avoid the blaming each other on when things aren't working out, but work together for solutions on those problems when they arise. So those are just some eight little communication skills that help practice developing intimacy within the relationship. And some of those we've been going over for the past couple weeks, so just some reminders on that page there. On the next page, though, we have what's your love language? And that's where we're going to be spending our time tonight. This was probably one of the first books that I read years ago from Gary Chapman, was Love Language. What's your love language? And we've already recapped already. We've talked about how this has kind of been building up through communication, talking with each other. And now as we're getting to the next level of understanding one another, we're going to look at, what speaks love? What is really love? We've talked about that, I think, a little bit. Remember, it's not a feeling, it's not an emotion, because those change. They change probably throughout the day, as depending on what's happening to you. Love is a choice. It's an action. It's a choosing that I'm going to love you despite the circumstances. Sometimes you might be in a bad mood, but I still love you. I'm not going to say, well, I don't love you anymore. You just said this or treated me that way. So love can't be conditional. It can't be I'm just going to love you if, or I'm going to love you when. It should just be, no, I love you, and I'm going to always love you. You don't have to worry about that. That's a given. I'm just going to love you. Just remember, as two, Christ loved us. Christ loved the church. He doesn't say, well, today I love you, and boy, if you're just not acting like a Christian today, then I don't think I can love you. I'm pulling back my love from you. Man, what if God did that to us based on our own actions or how we were? It's just like, man, we'd be really messed up. But thanks be to God that He just loves us despite ourselves, and He loved us when we were even enemies. He sent us His Son to die for us. It wasn't based on us. So that's how we need to learn to love our spouses in the same way. So defining love, our love tank and our love languages. The first one we were saying, love is a choice, not a feeling. We're commanded to love, commanded to love God, and husbands are told to love your wife. Ephesians 5:25, and that verse right there says, husbands, love your wives, just as Christ loved the church. Love is demonstrated to us by Jesus through not only His words, but in His actions. And 1 John 3:18 says we're also to love in actions and in truth. So it's through our actions. It's how we show our love to our spouse. It's going to be evident, not only for them to see, but guess what? Other people are going to see it as well. Because if you have kids in your home, and maybe you've had them before in the past, or when you had kids there, or if you have them now, guess who else is going to see that you love each other? Your children, other family members, neighbors, people that are around you here at church. They say, well, I can really say you love each other. You can just tell. Look at them. Can you tell a couple when they're in love? Especially if they're just walking in the mall or in the park holding hands and they're just sitting there and just doting on each other. Boy, they must be newly in love or engaged. Usually we think of and say, versus a couple that are just kind of walking 10 feet apart and kind of going their own way and nothing being said, and just like, well, okay, well, there's that too. Obviously, love's going to show because it's an action. Let me talk a little bit about our love tank. All of us have a love tank within us. So think of it that way. We have a love tank, if you will, and it needs to be filled or poured into pretty often, if not daily, all right, for us to be effectively running or operating in a healthy and balanced manner. Our spouse has an important role to be pouring into and keeping the other's love tank filled by speaking love to them. Just think of like with a vehicle or anything that runs on fuel. I mean, when it's full, you're going to be able to get a lot of miles out of it versus it's running on fumes pretty soon. You're dead in the water. It's just, we ain't going anywhere until we get some fuel put in us. So when our spouse is speaking or pouring love into us, that's going to help us feel energized, motivated. We're going to be ready to carry on, move on, versus just kind of like I don't feel loved. I just feel like they don't appreciate me. They don't care. They don't understand. We don't line up with each other. We're missing each other. Just what's going on? So it could be that the love tank is empty. Just you've been running on fumes for weeks, months, maybe even years, and just feeling like I'm just existing. Then we get to a point where we're just existing. We're kind of going through the motions. We're more of just friends through the marriage versus it being hand in hand and just, man, my spouse speaks love into me often as they can. When depleted or empty, we become frustrated. Here's some of the emotions. You get angry. You're confused. You get desperate. Some people will withdraw. You get selfish. And the list goes on and on. So when our needs are getting met, pretty soon we're saying, well, you know what, then I need to find out how I can meet those needs. If they're not going to pour into me, I need to find other ways, other people, other things, other hobbies I can get involved with, just because I want to feel like I'm being valued and appreciated. So then we'll seek out and search for what's going to fill that love tank. And the world has plenty of things, to obviously fill those things with. But at the heart of it, we want to be making sure that we're filling our spouse's love tank. And at the heart of mankind's existence is the desire to be intimate and to be loved by another. This is the design and purpose for marriage. For that need within us is to be met and guide. Did I say guiled? I probably misspelled that word there. But it's meant to be by a face-to-face relationship with our spouse. Remember when God said it's not good for man to be alone in Genesis 2:18. We become one flesh. And in order to enter into a deep and intimate relationship that fulfills and meets the human need to be loved by another. So God obviously knew it wasn't good for us to be alone. Created Eve so that we can have that face-to-face relationship with our spouse, one another. Obviously, remember, God and Adam had a relationship when he was first created. But it says it wasn't good, though, for man just to be alone. He needs someone that looks just like him to be able to have that relationship with. We next to know. See, I'm sorry. Sometimes I'm typing these things and I get in a phone call and I get interrupted and I'm leaving out words. We next need to know to understand the proper way to fill the other's love tank with what they know and speak so that they feel loved, appreciated, and respected. Think of it this way. Putting the wrong fuel or love into another's tank may cause another to run poorly. They won't be as effective if using the proper fuel or love language. So different engines might run on different, octanes of fuel or just different things. But, man, if you put gas in a diesel engine, anybody that knows anything about diesel engine, that's just a big no-no, and that's very, very expensive. That's not going to get you very far at all. I even was looking at the one vehicle we have. It has it says E, I don't know if it's E10, E85. It has a cross through. It's just like you can't put that in there. It's only for whatever. So certain fuels can only go in certain vehicles for them to run properly. It might run them, but it's going to be spitting and sputtering and conking out. It's just like, well, I'm getting poor gas mileage. Well, you got to put in the right fuel into it. When you put pour the right type of love into your spouse, where it's just like, man, that's like the octane I need. When you're pouring that into me, that's what I'm talking about, baby. Now you're going to get the more horsepower. You're going to get better fuel mileage. We'll be able to go the distance now when you're pouring it in properly. That leads us to love language number 1. So there's 5 of them. Okay, 5 love languages. Now all of these love languages speak love. Okay, so just because this might not be your language of love doesn't mean that that's that's going to communicate hate to you, because all of them speak love to you, but it might be very minimal. So you say, well, yeah, that's nice, but that doesn't do as much for me as this does. I will run much better if I had this being poured into me. So this first one is words of affirmation. This would be verbal compliments, words that affirm. Just simple, straightforward statements are powerful communicators of love. Words can go a long way in encouraging and building up each other. When we receive those complimentary words, our tank gets filled, and we are then motivated to reciprocate. So remember, the words are powerful, very, very powerful. And it just is important to be able to speak kind words to each other, to build them up, to affirm them, to make sure that they feel valued by telling them those same things. It's also the way you say and express those kind words. Take I love you, for example. It can be communicated in many ways by how you are expressing it. So think about that. Think about someone saying I love you. All right, now obviously you hear that. If I just say it like in a normal, regular tone, just says I love you. Just like, okay. But if someone says like, yeah, I love you. I'm like, well, see the snake, you're just like, what does that mean? I heard that, just like, well, I love you too. Just versus I love you. Like, well, just, yeah, I'm saying it back to you. Or just like, I love you. Just like, oh, wow. So there's different ways to say it. So the words alone mean something, but also how you say it, how you communicate it. If you're short with it or make it seem like, well, that didn't seem real. Were you sincere about how you said that? Because that just seemed like you don't even care. So how you say those words to a person can also mean a lot. Our words are also a double-edged sword, because that same tongue, we can also use words to hurt and cut deeply. So if the love language, number one, is yours, of words of affirmation, really pour and speak love into you, understand that words also, on the opposite end of that, will really be what hurts you. Someone else whose love language isn't words, words probably doesn't affect them that much. It's like you can say some things maybe hurting or cutting to them, and they could probably just blow it off like, whatever, that's just your problem. Someone else might take it and just be like, oh, man, that just devastated them. They might take a couple days and they're just sitting there crying. They just can't get over it, or just totally bummed and thinking like, man, I just don't know. I'm just really hurt by it. You might say something, I can't believe you said that, and just like, what are you talking about? Because if words isn't theirs, they're just gonna like, that's nothing. That was just something little. But to you, if that's your love language, that's going to be huge. Because words can compliment, but words can also hurt and cut. Where's that here? Then hurtful words will hit home harder versus another person whose love language is not words. I just said that. So also be mindful, too, that this love language should be one that uses humble words. Humble words. Remember, love makes requests, not demands. So with someone whose words of affirmation is their love language, make sure that you're requesting things. Honey, would you be able to do this for me? I'd like you to do this. Can we spend time over here? I'd really like to be able to do that with you. Versus like, you better make time right now. This better happen or else. So it's not demands, or it's not giving ultimatums. It's either this or that. The way in which you use your words will either make them or break them. Understand that. Fill their tank or drain it. So you're going to fill their tank by pouring in the positive words, speaking positively into them, or you're going to drain it by the negative words. Motivate or discourage them. And so it goes with those that value words to be a primary or even secondary love language. So this might be your primary love language, words of affirmation. It could be your secondary. Usually we have two of them. So kind of like how we've taken some self-assessment or little tests that kind of show like what's your strong one. Maybe there's a secondary one, and the other ones will kind of rank accordingly. Words for me is probably like my secondary. All right, so that's pretty high on my list, is words. So words affect me quite a bit, positively or negatively. The second love language is quality time. Some think, man, when you're spending time with me, spending time together with me, that's going to fill my tank. I don't care what we are doing, but just if we're just together, if we're just hanging out, whether we're watching TV or walking in the park, just whatever it is, I just want to be with you, spending time together. This is very important to a person with this love language. They do not just want some time with you, but they want quality time. All right, don't just sit in the same house together. It says, well, I'm spending time with you. We've been in the same house for 8 hours today. It's like, well, obviously we need to be together, at least having some sort of connection there. They want quality time, undivided attention in which they are made a priority. So it's not just where you're watching TV and she's reading a book, and I mean that might be okay, but there needs to be something that's drawing us and connecting us together. They want the TV off, your phone down, the computer put away, and for you to be looking them in the eye as you have a conversation, and are simply spending time with them. So again, you're connecting with that way of the other things we could do. If you're doing them together, that's one thing. But if you're doing that and she's doing this, she's going to feel like, well, you're spending time with me, but you've just been on that phone or on that computer or whatever it is. I'd like you just to spend time with me. Can I be the priority versus whatever else it is, the game, the football, you name it. It is also more than proximity. Remember I said this about not just being in the same house or the same room. The key word that makes quality time work is togetherness. They want to feel like we're together, not just kind of like you're here and I'm there, but we're worlds apart right now. We could be sitting in the same room, but physically you're here, but mentally you're off thinking about your work, you're thinking about that hobby, you're thinking about whatever it is. You're not even paying attention to me or anything. So it's togetherness is the key here. It doesn't matter so much as to what you're doing together, as long as you are together doing it. So if you're, like I say, being together and having the same thing that's connecting you there is what's going to be important. And that could be sitting and talking. That could be just going for a walk, meeting for lunch, riding bikes together, and so on. But you're together, whatever it is you're doing, you're together, spending that quality time. Not just any time, but it's the quality. You want to have focused time within the same activity as you share time together. I was getting my pages mixed up here in a minute. Also, quality conversation is important when you talk and communicate with one another. I think that's the next one, right? Mm-hmm. Okay. I didn't have these stapled together. This is more than words of affirmation. Okay, so understand that, which is focused on what we are saying, whereas quality conversation focuses on what we are hearing from the other person. So this is when you're engaging in dialogue, not just giving them words of complimenting them and just, I just value you so much and I appreciate how hard you work and all those things, and you're building them up that way. This is where there's dialogue, and you're having the assertive, active listening type of skills taking place, and you're understanding each other. There's some questions being asked, and you're really having a good conversation. We're engaged with them in dialogue, asking questions, drawing out feelings, and listening sympathetically. You're seeking to understand their thoughts. You're trying to understand their feelings and their desires. See, there's that understanding part of it. So that's going to help increase that intimacy level when, boy, you really understand me. You understand exactly what I'm feeling and thinking about of that issue or that situation. You really are valuing where I'm at on it whenever you're showing me that you feel that you care, you desire to know exactly where I'm at on it. Here's some helpful hints on those things, and some of these sound repetitive, but it's just good. It's just, again, to hear them again, is maintain eye contact when speaking. That's very important, that we're looking at each other. Don't try to listen and be doing something else at the same time. Put away those other distractions. Just make sure, okay, I'm going to put those things down, and maybe I just got to fold my hands and just look right at you, and I'm just here. I'm ready to take it all in. Also, thirdly, is listen for feelings. Don't just listen for the content, just to hear like, okay, all right, I got you, I'm hearing it, and okay. But listen to say, well, as they're saying that, do you see like tears welling up in their eyes? Do you see like just very frustration where they're just getting angry? It's like, oh, you're pretty upset about that, aren't you? Like, yeah, I'm pretty upset. And you can just see that in their tone. So you're listening to see, how is this in them right now? Is this coming across as like, boy, they're really whatever, and just learn how to listen for those feelings. Observe body language. Notice how they're sitting. They seem to be very closed off with their arms folded, legs crossed, and just kind of like, okay, that's just sending a signal that you don't want to communicate, or you're just kind of, you're there, but you don't want me to pry. Or do they seem very open and just kind of like leaning forward on the edge of their seat and just, they're engaging by looking at you, or they're just kind of like off in another world, so to speak. But look at their body language. Also, refuse to interrupt them. When they're speaking, let them speak. Let them speak their piece. Let them get it all out before you just say, well, what you need to do, or I don't have time, or you're trying to interject or just finish their sentence. Try not to interrupt. Let them speak. So that has all to do with quality time together and how you're speaking to each other, giving the dialogue, asking questions, drawing out those feelings with each other. The third love language is receiving gifts. obviously we all know what gifts are. We know how to probably give and receive a gift, and some of us like that at Christmas time, birthdays, but also it's nice if that's your love language. If you get gifts given to you, just like that could be your love language. It could be something simple. It could be like, you know what, I was driving home and I stopped at the store and I just found this little whatever. I just thought of you today. And I just got that for you. And that person might say, oh, I can't believe you thought of me. That just was so thoughtful. And that just filled my love tank completely. It doesn't even have to be something that you buy. It could be something that you found. So you remember the place we went on this date years and years ago? And I went there and I found this rock that just kind of reminded me of just that first time we walked down this path together. And I just found that, and I took a mark and I wrote something on it, the date that we had our date there, and today's date just says, I love you. And that could be like, wow, that was so special. I mean, it didn't cost anything, but it shows that you've spent some time, you found that. It could be something that you made. I took some time to just make this, and it could be a hope chest. It could just be whatever, just something that you just took some time to handcraft and make this. So this, I just want to give this to you. Well, that speaks love. That communicates love. So the attitude of love here is accompanied by that giving. I want to give to you, to show it's the action. A gift is something you can hold in your hand. It says that you were thinking of me and want me to remember you. The gift is a symbol of the thought. It doesn't matter, again, if it costs money or not. What is important is the thought of him or her. So here it's the thought that counts. Gifts are visual symbols of our love for each other. And think of it, the things that says value to you when it's really important, it could be, think of something just really silly, but if that really spoke to you, you're going to put that up on the wall. Think of this way, think if your kids went out and picked a bunch of dandelions, just weeds, but they gave them to you, you're just like, oh, you put them in a vase and they're just weeds, they're probably going to die, but you put them up there on the counter and just like, man, I really appreciate that, because they're thinking, here, Mom or Dad, I want to give you those things. So it's that giving portion. They can be looked upon and bring up the moment that the gift was given and under what circumstances they were given as well. Just like I said, like if you had a time where you went on a date together, one of the first times, or whatever was the situation or case, and you just kind of took something you found or said something where you even just typed up a poem about that event or that day and just gave it to them. Just like, man, that spoke a lot to me. Gifts, again, could be purchased, they can be found, or they can be made. Pick her up some flowers. You can fold a napkin and cut a heart out of it and just give it to her with your names on it. Something as simple as that might sound cheap, but I mean, when you think of it, it's like, man, that was really kind of cool, There's some things too. You can even just take little pieces of paper. You can just write some just complimentary words. This would speak to a person whose love language is words of affirmation. Just put like, I love you, care about you. You're just a wonderful husband, wonderful wife. Put those in balloons. You blow them up in time and just say like, here's Monday's balloon. Maybe write Monday on. Here's Tuesday's balloon. They have to pop it and they find out what's inside there. Just something like that that doesn't cost a lot of money, but it's just taking the time just to give reminders and saying, hey, I love you, through those little gifts of giving. You can have found a very unique stone, talked about this earlier, from one of your favorite places and remind you of the time that you've had together there. Choosing to spend money and buy them a gift over something that you want or have value and speaks very lovingly towards a spouse with this love language. So just choosing to say, you know what, instead I was saving up for this over here, but instead of using that money for what I was saving for, I decided to buy you this with that. And that could really speak a lot, because it knows, well, I know you really wanted that gift. I know you were really saving for this, whatever, whether it was for a motorcycle, whether it was for a boat or a sport. I was really wanting these pair of shoes or just this tool I was saving for, but you know what, I decided to spend this on you. That could be like, wow, that just spoke a lot to me because you chose to sacrifice. You're a sacrifice for them and making them a priority to show them that you love them and that you're thinking of them and you value who and what they are to you, which is very important. So that was love language number 3, was gifts. Love language number 4 is acts of service. Acts of service. A lot of people says, don't tell me how much you love me. I want to see it. I want to see it through your actions. And the best way to do that is when you do things that you know your spouse would like you to do. And you are seeking to serve them through your actions. You are speaking the love language of acts of service. A lot of wives might be sitting here thinking like, yeah, that would be so romantic and sexy if I came home and seen my husband vacuuming the floor, folding the laundry, dishes are done, everything's put away, and I would be like, oh my goodness, that just filled my love tank right up, just to see that you took time to do those things. And a guy might be saying like, yeah, but I don't like doing those things. Well, if that's their love language, you might need to step up and do some of those things that show, here's some things that are important to your spouse, so let me do those things for you to show you that I do love you. I know when Gary Chapman was talking about this, he says that he hates the vacuum. He said the one thing that he says, when I get married, I would never vacuum anything. He says that what's worse than even vacuuming on the floor is vacuuming like the drapes and the curtains. And he says, but guess what I found out my wife's love language is acts of service. And the best way that she says that you can show me that you love me is to vacuum and vacuum those curtains and drapes. He says, so guess what I do just about every other day? He's like, I'm there like, I'm vacuuming, and she just loves it, you know what I'm saying? Because that just shows that he loves her. And he said, I'll vacuum the curtains. To him, it's just kind of like, that goes against everything that within him. But he says, but because that speaks love to you, I'm going to do that for you. I'm going to take time to make sure that you know I love you. And he's been doing that. I think they've been married over 60 years. So that just shows through his actions he loves her. Such actions I put here are like cooking a meal, cleaning the house, vacuuming, mowing the yard. It doesn't have to be like just womanly household chores that we just might be thinking traditionally of. It could be washing the car, taking out the trash, doing the laundry, cleaning the garage, walking the dog, changing the cat's litter box, trimming the shrubs. And I mean, just think of all the stuff that we could just naturally be doing. But for a certain spouse that this is their love language, neglecting to do those things shows like, well, if you don't care about those things, you don't care about me. You don't care about us. You don't care about our house. You just don't care. Pretty soon it's like, well, you don't love me. So what do you mean I don't love you? I love you. Well, look around you. I mean, I don't see that. So you might be thinking like, I don't get it. Because if that's not your love language, you're just not going to get it. But if that's theirs, all those little things that I was just talking about, if that's not happening, they're not happening. But when you're doing those things, they're like, man, I just feel like you're just really loving me because you're taking time. You're doing all these things that just help me, that just show me that you value me, value us. It just shows that you love me. These acts, understand that these acts require thought. So you got to put some thinking into it. Planning time, effort, and energy. So that's where it really communicates the love side of it, because that's what they see. It's like, boy, you took the time to go and do whatever. You did that around the house. You picked that up for me. Boy, I appreciate your effort and energy. That shows me that you're thoughtful. When done with a positive spirit, they speak and express love to the others, whose love language is acts of service. When speaking this love language, do not fall into the trap, though, of making demands from the other person because you want things done to make you feel loved or valued. So remember before, love doesn't demand, love does what? It requests, right? You make requests. So that's just say, honey, would you mind if you do this for me, honey? I mean, you're so great at that, and I appreciate you doing the laundry, but next time, could you make sure you don't mix in the whites with all the reds and other colors? I mean, I really appreciate it, but next time don't do that, because here's why, everything's pink. Not to offend anybody who's wearing pink today. Unless Chris was doing the laundry.
Yeah.
If I didn't do it, it wouldn't get done.
See, there we go. That's right. That's your love language, right? Acts of service.
Lined up along the wall.
Yeah, so we don't want to get into the trap of just, well, you have to do this. You're demanding it from them versus requesting it. Just so you can feel like, okay, I don't want to just force you to, fill my love tank that way. You're going to want them to do it. So you need to make requests. Guide your spouse into understanding that these things are important to you. This is what matters. This is what speaks love to you. So by doing these things, honey, for me, for us, this is what fills my love tank. It shows that you care and that you value them. Criticism from a spouse about the other behaviors, is an effective way to get them to speak this love language. Criticism often needs clarification and can be a healthy conversation that turns demands into requests. So think about, how you criticize. When you do it in a proper way, proper understanding of how you do that, that's going to guide and direct them versus just demanding it. You need to request it. Be aware also not to treat your spouse as an inanimate object, like a doormat. Okay? Manipulation by guilt is not a love language, or coercion by fear is also not love. So don't say it this way, well, if you love me, you would do this for me. If you love me. You will do this or you will be sorry. So don't put an ultimatum. Boy, if you don't do this, then guess what? Now you're just taking the acts of service and turning it into something that you're, okay, I guess I better do this or else. So there's good ways to fill that love tank, the positive ways with words, through our acts of service. Even gifts And then spending time, we got to make sure we're doing it properly, in the right manner, in the right way, and with the right attitude. This begins to develop and speak conditional love and treatment based on what you do or don't do for me. See what that sets up? It creates and sets up a conditional atmosphere or environment. We don't want that. Just like, well, I'm only going to do this if you do that. And then when you have done this, then I will do. Well, love's not conditional. It should be unconditional. So make sure that you're not doing those things that way. And finally, the last love language, number 5, is physical touch. Physical touch is the earliest form of expressing love to a newborn baby and to children. So think of it that way. Whenever you're taking a baby, the most important thing you do is to hold it close. Even putting that skin-to-skin contact there, but just so that they're nurtured, they just feel that warmth and their closeness. The hand is by the head, and they're just stroked. They just have that physical closeness. That's one of the most important things you can do for a newborn baby, is to hold it, just so that it feels loved. They need to be hugged, touched, kissed, and held close to develop a healthy emotional life. It is also a very powerful vehicle for communicating marital love, is that physical touch. Holding hands, kissing, hugging, embracing, and sexual intercourse are all ways of expressing love to one's spouse. So understand, physical touch isn't just the sexual side of it. It could just be just having your hand on their shoulder or just on their leg. Just being next to each other, putting your arm in his arm, or her arm. Just that holding hands. Just being next to each other. Just giving that embrace and just that hug and just holding each other for a few extra seconds before you go to work or when you come home from work. Those sort of things. If love language number 5 is yours, physical touch will be very important to you. All those just different contacts that you make throughout the day with each other. A person with this love language, understand too, will feel unloved without it. So if you don't have that physical touch happening, if there's not those little touches, the hugging, whether it's hugging, kissing, sexual intercourse with them, if those things start to be not there, then pretty soon it's like, well, I guess they don't love me. Just because it's like, well, no, I still love you. But remember, if that's their love language, you need to know how to be able to speak that to them. But when it is present, their love tank is filled. They feel secure in the love with their spouse. So instead of feeling unsecure, they're like, man, I don't think my spouse loves me. They're going to feel secure, and they'll be able to rest assured in that. There are different dialects to speaking physical touch. The first one, sexual intercourse, for example, is only one of those dialects. So don't just think that, well, the physical touch is just sex in and of itself. That's just one dialect of physical touch. Physical touch can make or break a relationship. Understand that. It can communicate hate or it can communicate love. Just like hitting a child would be detrimental to them if this was their primary love language. Some kids, you ever heard of this? Like, there's some kids that are just, they're so bad, boy, I can beat the tar out of them, and they still just act that way. It just doesn't do anything to them. You know what I mean? Because, well, that's probably physical touch is not their love language, so positively or negatively, it's not working. But man, if I scold them and just talk to them and say, you know how disappointed I am in you? And just, boy, you just really talk to them that way, they could just feel like, man, that really hit home, because words might be speaking what their love language is. So it's like when you get to understand, when you see the positive side, but also the negative way it impacts people, that's probably their language then. Some kids you can spank them all day, that's not going to change them. Or you just go think about, I'm going to go get no, I'm good now, I'm good. I definitely don't want to be hit or spanked or nothing. They're afraid of that, but physical touch for them probably speaks a lot of love. A tender hug will shout love to them as well with this language. And the same is true for adults. Some people, if that's not their love language, you can come up to them and give them a hug, and they're like, hey, or, take it or leave it. But some people, man, they're just huggers. Just see them, they're hugging every other person in and out the church, So I'm looking for one more person to hug, just because that's just how I speak love to them, how I receive love, just that physical contact. Love touches can be direct and demand your full attention. Just like a back rub. So they could be a lot more than just a handshake or just a quick pat on the back, how are you doing? So sometimes it could be more direct like that. Or they can be implicit and require a moment to place your hand on their shoulder. As you pour them a drink, for example. So if you're just pouring a drink, put your hand on their shoulder, and that could just that little quick 2-second touch on the shoulder can speak love. If, for example, sexual intercourse is your spouse's primary dialect within the physical touch, reading and discussing the art of lovemaking will enhance your expression of love. And there's some books that I had out last week, and I'll get those out probably within the next week or two and put all those out there. So there's just different ways that if that's their main dialect, You want to make sure that you're speaking that love language properly, versus if it's just, that's not the primary dialect, versus just, the hand on the shoulder, holding hands, just that closeness. Just if you're just sitting by me, I want you to be sitting by me to where I can feel you touching me. We're close, we're shoulder to shoulder, arm in arm, or you're just leaning on me, or I'm leaning on you. They have to have that and feel that closeness. Touching the other as you pass them by when leaving the room. Sitting close, touching them when you watch TV together. Kissing before you leave the house. Holding hands in public. Touching their knee under the dinner table. All speaks love to a person with this love language. So all those little things are going to speak love to that person if that's their love language. Now if you're sitting here thinking like, yeah, but that doesn't mean nothing to me. Well, that's probably not your love language. So you have to understand, well, if that's my spouse's, then a lot of those things are going to be of value to them. To touch my body is to touch me. So understand that. So if you're touching my body, any part of me, you're touching me right to my heart. It's a person with that love language. To withdraw from my body, all right, don't even think of it as a sexual, but just think to withdraw from my body, my person, is to distance yourself from me emotionally. So the more that I don't feel that contact or that closeness or that hug or that just touch, pretty soon you just start feeling that distance there, and then that's a negative impact that can happen as well. So now that we've kind of gone through and kind of defined those different love languages, what they are, positively, negatively, the learning exercise here, which we're going to go through, is to kind of, let's identify what your primary love language is and your secondary. All right, so we've kind of defined them out. The first one says this: what does your spouse do or fail to do that hurts you most deeply? All right, so think about it. Just think about what is it that your spouse does or fails to do that hurts you the most? Like, man, if my spouse just told me or said this or that and cut me with words, or if they, pulled themselves away from me, if it didn't touch me for weeks on end, or if I didn't get a gift from them, I'm like, man, that would just devastate me. Or if we didn't spend time. So think about it. If they didn't spend time with me, or if I had seen like everything around the house, like nothing has been picked up for 2 months around here, that would just crush me. So think of it that way. What hurts you the most or most deeply in those realms? Think about it that way. So if you can answer that question, all right, the opposite of what hurts you is most probably your love language. So if you say like, what would hurt me the most? Remember I said like with words, if she just told me this, that, or the other, I would just be devastated. Well, probably words of affirmation would be a love language for me. All right, because the negative will be the opposite of what's most important to you as well. Secondly, what have you most often requested of your spouse? So when you're talking to your spouse, like, boy, I really wish we would just hold hands and we would just cuddle up, just be by me. So if you always are hearing that from my spouse, will you just come here? Can we just talk? I just want to spend time with you and I don't care what it is, but can we just have a conversation? Or, I'd love to go on a walk with you right now. So if you're always asking for my spouse, can we do these things? Or, boy, wouldn't that look so, I'd love to have a little gift like that. So if you kind of hear those things, like, yeah, my spouse is always kind of hinting, or, I'm kind of getting that pull from them. And you can think of your own terms. If that's what you're asking for a lot of, that's probably your love language. The thing you most often request is likely the things you have made that you would make you feel the most love. Okay? So if that's what you're requesting a lot, that's probably what your love language is. And thirdly, in what ways do you regularly express love to your spouse? Okay, so the way that what you know your love language to be, you might not have defined it before, but the way we usually speak love to our spouse is usually through our love language. So whatever my two love languages are, I have a primary and secondary, I'm going to speak that because that's my native tongue. Say it's English. Well, I'm going to just speak English because that's what I know. That's how I speak. But if she's Spanish, she's going to be like, I'm not getting you. I hear you, but when she speaks, she's speaking Spanish. I'm like, man, we're just missing each other. Well, guess what? I need to learn to speak Spanish so that she needs to speak English so that she's meeting me. And when we're doing that, okay, now you're speaking my love language. Your method of expressing love will be a strong indication that would also make you feel loved. So it's how you express that. Those are the ways that you can identify what your love language is. The one that's the strongest for you, whether that's physical touch, words, time, quality time, gifts. What's the last one? I just forgot. Acts of service. If those are the 5 there. So as you kind of go through, there's going to be a primary and then the secondary that's probably right close behind that one. Those are the 2 that are going to speak love. Now you might have say, you know, about 3 or 4 of them speak love to me. You know what I'm saying? You might have one that's way at the bottom. But you're going to have one that's going to probably speak more than others, and one that's probably at the bottom, and a few in between. So understand that too. Whenever you know what your love language is and your spouse knows what it is, if they're the same love language, a lot of times it's just going to happen just like that. I've seen couples that when we go through this, they're like, yeah, we have the same love language. Mine is acts of service and it is gifts. Well, mine is acts of service and gifts. Well, guess what? They're speaking the same dialect throughout the day. They just can even finish each other's thought on how I'm going to show them love. And as soon as they begin to show that to them, they're like, oh, that just spoke love to me. Yep, you got it. If you got opposite ends of the spectrum where, say, hers is gifts and quality time and yours is words and physical touch, well, man, I better learn to speak these two, and she needs to learn to speak these two, or we're just always going to miss each other. It just seems like, it's just so hard because that's not what I usually speak. Mine is physical touch and words of affirmation, or hers is gifts and acts of service. So guess what? You know, we need to make some adjustments there, or you're going to be putting the wrong fuel in my tank every time you're trying to speak it. Because, see, that's what I know, or that's what she knows. So within each of you, you have to say, well, this is what I know. Well, that's great. That's what your spouse needs to know that and speak that into you. Here at the bottom it says, you usually have a primary and secondary love language that speaks love to you and fills your tank. All 5 love languages speak love, but the other languages will not speak into you as much as your main one does. Spend time ranking these 5 and then see if you know your spouse's as well. Then at least 3 times a week, ask your spouse for a tank check. Kind of like, you know, sometimes you got to look at your fuel gauge to see if you're running on empty or you're full, you're half. Ask them for a tank check. And on a scale of 0 to 10, how is your love tank? 0 being empty, 10 being full. So you got to ask your spouse, just say like, how are you doing today? Where are you at? How's your love tank? I'm about like a 2 right now. Ooh, okay, I didn't know it was that low. Boy, you must have, I just need to speak into you. You know, I need to do those things that's going to fill that love tank back up. If they're running like I'm running a 10 today. Awesome. So maybe I'm doing my part. Maybe she's doing her part. So just kind of check the gauge every once in a while to make sure they're filled up. Because obviously if you don't check that gauge and you're kind of like, man, she just seems angry, she's frustrated, or he's just bent and he's this way, and it's just like, well, have you looked at the fuel gauge lately? They could have been empty months ago, years ago. You just missed it. I had a neighbor one time just recently this past summer came over and said, will you help me with my mower? She said, it just quit running. So I don't know what's wrong with it. I'm calling Due Cut, ready for them to come pick this thing up. It's like a brand new mower. So I go over there, and it's like the battery's almost dead. I'm just trying to figure it out, and I'm just like, well, let's just look at the obvious. I kind of wrap on the gas tank. I was like, I think you're out of fuel. Kind of looked at the cab. It's like, I can see the plastic all the way down. And she goes, no, I just filled it yesterday. I said, yeah, but you're out today because you must have been doing a lot of mowing. She's like, well, I mowed a couple times. And I said, go get some fuel. She's like, no, I already filled it. She said, that's not the problem. I said, just go get some fuel. I said, let's pour into it. So she said, pour. I said, just keep pouring. She thought a little bit was enough. I said, just keep pouring in. Fill it all the way up. She filled it up, cranks it up, and it starts right up. You know, see, obviously she's thinking that can't be the problem. You know, sometimes there's problems thinking, well, it can't be that. It could be as simple as it was just out of gas. You know, she's ready. Man, needs a new battery. I mean, something's broke. It's just thing's a piece of junk or just whatever. Just like my spouse just can't be fixed. He or she is just the way she is. Well, sometimes it's like, well, are they empty? Are they out? Do they need to be poured into? So when you know and understand your spouse's love language, it could be very easy for you to speak it if you're the same love language. It might be like, yeah, it's easy for me to speak my spouse's love language because that's what I normally speak. It's very easy. It could be, you know what, I got to put more time and energy into it because I got to think, wait a minute, I'm talking more my love language. I'm talking more words, and words isn't hers. Hers is acts of service, so I better quit talking so much and start doing.